Shalom, friend. This week I am very excited to speak with you about love and relationships inspired by this week's text, Chayei Sarah, about the life of Sarah. So Abraham sends his servant, asks his servant to look for a woman who has the attributes that he thinks would be good for Isaac, and sends the servant off. And after traveling some distance, the servant comes into contact with Rebecca. And Rebecca is this kind and strong woman who is carrying all of this water near a well. And she not only gives the servant and his camel water, but then provides water to his entire caravan. And the servant is incredibly impressed with Rebecca's strength and warmth and hospitality, and gives her gifts to acknowledge this, as well as to, in an effort to try to convince her to be willing to come back and meet Isaac for marriage. I believe he gives her some bracelets and a nose ring. I'm curious how the nose ring worked. I guess that means hypothetically she already had a piercing, which is pretty cool. So that's some background context that leads us into the scene where Rebecca has journeyed back with the servant and the caravan for quite some time in order to meet and marry Isaac. And when she gets there, she dismounts. But the tricky piece is with the Hebrew for her the Hebrew that is used referring to her dismount is used in such a way that it's indicative that she likely fell off the camel. And the rabbis of old and even in modern commentaries have a field day with this scene intellectually around trying to figure out, was it because she was essentially sort of the classic head over heels, or she fell for him, and in falling for him upon seeing him at a distance, she fell off the camel. Other more modern commentaries, like from Rabbi David Siegel, where he refers to one of his Torah study students, and their insight was perhaps that actually she fell from a sense of great disappointment. Like, she'd gone on this long journey, she herself is this amazing woman, and then there's this schlumpy guy who kind of seems down on his luck, and she's likely uncomfortable, and she falls just from like, this is what I traveled all this way for? So I'm not really sure which one it is, because in my own life, I've definitely had both of those scenarios. I can think back to when I first met my first boyfriend in person. I had the falling off scenario where like it was like jaw drop, and oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? So as it would turn out, or as it turned out, this person is and was a very sweet, lovely individual. But the first time I met him at the airport, which was obviously an anxious and exciting moment, we had sort of a modern relationship. We'd met on JDate. And so I go to meet him, and he is filthy. Part of me wanted to run away, which is maybe how Rebecca felt when she saw Isaac walking in the fields. I don't know if he was cleanly or not. You know, he might be this patriarch from our tradition, and maybe he was covered in filth. I don't know. I mean, my ex literally had grass-stained jeans. Like, he'd run and skid on his knees several times as if he almost thought it was cool. And his clothes were completely wrinkled. I'd grown up around all kinds of people, but my default model for a partner has often been my father, who is a black man, who is immaculate in his dress, whose clothes, I don't even know if I've ever seen him in clothes that have wrinkles. I mean, maybe on like a Sunday afternoon after he's been sitting in his dad chair for hours watching TV, but like other than that, if he's out in public or at an airport, he is in beautiful attire. So that was just a culture shock. And between then and the story I'm about to share, about 15 years elapsed. A whole lot of trial and error and a lot of pain. These challenges always perplexed me, and I think that there are a number of reasons for them. whether it's music or TV or a lot of different messages that are out there in the world about love and relationships, that I think a lot of them are very confusing and not so helpful. So what I want to do in this episode is share an insight that I had last year upon meeting the person who I believe is my Beshert, in the hopes that for others who may have had or are having similar experiences to me, maybe this will be helpful for you. I also want to clarify a few things before I dive into that, as per usual. One, I don't think that people need to be, particularly women, but anyone needs to be in a romantic relationship to be complete. So I want to make that clear. Personally, for me, having a significant other is something that I've wanted and that I do want, but it's not for everyone, and that's totally okay. Whether they're queer or heteronormative relationships, there are a number of strengths that come from a more traditional marital structure, which is also what I'm seeking in my life, but there's also a history of oppression and particularly sexism that's associated with that institution, and marriage is also not for everyone. And in sharing my perspective, again, I'm offering some insights that I've learned, and I wish a woman who was my same age or older than me had shared the insight that I'm about to share, but I also recognize that this may or may not be helpful for you. And feel free to let me know in the comments below. So here's what I came to realize. Last summer, I met and fell in love with the person that I hope I will be with for a very long time. I realized that in retrospect, with regard to all of my prior relationships, that regardless of how wonderful or how awful the individuals were, that I was always settling. And I realized this because when I met Hassan and noticing that he possessed nearly all and then some of the traits that I'd always been seeking, I realized that it actually was possible for me to meet a person who I meant to be with. So going from that first experience that was similar to the interpretation of Rebecca being like, "Ay," and falling off the camel, I had a similar sort of falling experience, but that was more grounded when I met my now partner, Hassan, last summer, in that I was just bowled over because I couldn't believe that someone who had so many different things that I'd been looking for, that I wasn't sure if it was possible, did actually exist. That I could find someone who was passionate about helping others, who was confident, who brought a lot of energy into the world, which is a big thing for me because I'm a very passionate person, and I was seeking someone where our energy would meet and be equal or similar or compatible. Who's fun, who's intuitive, who is very confident, and who is very self-assured in his ability to have a vision and to bring it into reality. Who's funny and connected with the people around him, who cares about his family and wants to have a family of his own, and from the very beginning was very serious and clear and committed to us. That was a huge realization for me, that all the time before I'd been settling. And I'd always wondered this, but I wasn't sure, so I didn't take action if relationships were a bit more, if I should treat relationships like how I treat jobs or housing, where I've had a lot of good fortune. And I use the core principle, there's more involved with it than this, but I use the core principle of I set my expectations, I set my desired intentions about the kind of experience I want to have. It's both specific yet flexible, and I'm really clear. And I set the standard, and I don't accept anything else until I find what I'm looking for. And this strategy, as applied to my employment and my housing, has worked incredibly well with great success. And I've now realized that it's similar, not that finding a life partner is exactly like getting a job or finding housing, but I realize in retrospect that there are actually similar principles. I think another important thing to note about the retroactive insight and connections I made around what happened with my partner is that was not only that it's actually possible and is completely reasonable to have the expectation of meeting someone who does meet and exceed many of the criteria that I'm seeking and really exceeds it. And also I had the insight that it's no coincidence for me that in the months leading up to meeting my now partner, that I'd reached a certain level of self-mastery in terms of building a life that I loved, having a very successful career, navigating challenges. I was in a lot of self-alignment when I met Hassan. I was at my peak level of confidence in my life. I was very happy with my life. I was meditating near daily, and basically I had a really robust inner life. And I listened to music that got me in a place of feeling loving and joyful. One song in particular that I'll include in the playlist by D'Angelo, his version of Me and My Dream and Eyes of Mine, which I think that's a remake, right? I think so. And, or if not, my bad. And it's funny because in retrospect, there are so many parts of that song that align with my relationship with Hassan that it's bizarre almost. It's amazing, it's miraculous, and it's just one more magical component of my life. And so I also think that that was a factor. It's not like a tried and true rule that I would officially recommend to anyone, but I would just observe that I don't think it's a coincidence that I both met Hassan when I did, and that I was in a place where I was ready to be with him. Because he is a very strong and passionate person who is clear about where he is. And it really mattered to me that I was in a place of great confidence and could bring similar energy to the relationship, and had also clarified unhealthy dynamics that I didn't want in my life anymore. And so my focus was even stronger on Hassan when I noticed that he doesn't have these other dynamics that I'm working to avoid in various facets of my life. He's really clear and healthy and balanced and supportive and loving and just the kind of person I want in my life. And from that point forward, meeting Hassan, I knew, changed me fundamentally. So by the end of the first week that we knew each other, as I was preparing to return home from my vacation to Senegal last summer, I was clear about two things: that it seemed like Hassan may be my beshert, maybe the person I meant to be with, but it was new, and so I wanted to give it time. But meeting him also forever changed my standards around relationships and showed me that it was possible to find someone who from the outset treated me with respect, and that I didn't have to compromise around significant things. I was clear that even if my relationship with him didn't work out, moving forward, I would approach relationships entirely differently and hold a much higher standard for myself, and be willing to wait, similar to how I wait for other things in terms of my jobs or housing, until I find the thing that is right and aligned for me. I'm happy to say now, and my hope for many people, and particularly women, is that as we're meeting people, whatever gender they may be, in whatever form of relationship is most relevant for you, that we feel grounded, that we simultaneously find partners who elicit the best that's in us, and with whom we experience synergy and maybe a bit of that intense feeling, but that also we feel a sense of clarity. We feel a sense of clarity of purpose that we brought into that dynamic, and we feel grounded and sure of ourselves to know and be able to discern moving forward if it's a person we want to be with, and a relationship that's going to be one that enhances our lives, and not simply where we are giving and being the caretaker, which even in some of my better relationships was a very significant dynamic, but rather there is equity or there is imbalance in certain ways that are okay with us and work for us. And that's it. That is my Torah in color as it relates to Chayei Sarah. And I'm really curious to hear, as per usual, what's your Torah in color? Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't already, I welcome you to subscribe to my channel and like this video, or not, but hopefully like this video, and we will be in touch soon. Thank you so very much. Much love.